Top news headlines from the news desk at the Katanning Paper right now on Radio for Your Neighborhood. AM 1380 and FM 103.7 WTYM Katanning Ford City.
And what we've done is this board explains kind of the overall. So this is the table of contents of the new code. It's organized into 10 separate articles, and the idea behind it is there is no miscellaneous catch-all section in it. The idea is that we're, creating these categories and putting the regulations where they're easy to find. So if you're interested in signs, you can go right to signs. You don't have to look at each one of the zoning districts to figure out what the regulations are for signs. So just to let you know, this format helps future revisions to the code, which they almost always happen. And so if somebody is making a new regulation that they want to drop in, it should help to put it in the right place since it's kind of organized in these separate articles. So one of the things that we did first off was to try to get a very good sense of what's on the ground in Ford City. So I did lots of photographing and driving around and kind of getting to know the building form that you have in Ford City right now, which is great. It's fantastic. This is the kind of form that people are looking for across the country. They're looking for walkable, a mix of different housing types, not just single family on big lots, but two-family and row houses and apartment buildings and so on. You guys have all that here in addition to your highly walkable downtown. So we wanted to kind of preserve that character and make sure that the zoning regulations would allow that to continue. So what we did was we created all new zoning districts that are mapped on that map. This is a proposed map of what how the new zoning would apply. So I don't know how many of you have actually looked at your zoning. Any idea what your zoning is? You've looked at your zoning. So the idea is that we are replacing the current districts with new districts, but the uses in general are staying with what's on the ground. The new regulations will match, again, the buildings that are on the ground. So right now, your single-family homes or your two-family homes have regulations on them that there's not a house in Ford City that would meet it. And so the idea here is that we're writing the regulations to match the house that's on the ground so that if somebody comes in and replaces it, they'll be able to rebuild it. If a house burns down, they'll be able to rebuild that. Everything will match the character of the existing neighborhoods. So if you look at the zoning map, you can see there's this darker core in here. Switch sides. So the purple is the downtown, so this is Ford Street. And what we've done is we've mapped all the locations that have commercial mixed-use buildings. So the old storefront on the ground floor and then upper floor office or residential. So that's all mapped with this dark purple. And then the dark blue is what we call a general office residential. So that can be either office or residential. And that matches all of the kind of office-y buildings that you have or some of the other sort of edges of the downtown. Then within the neighborhoods, we have the N1 zoning district that applies to almost all of the residential homes. And then within those, we've looked at all of the different kind of corner stores and little office buildings that you have within your community, which again is something that's highly desirable in most places. So you can walk to the corner or go to the corner bar or go to the hair salon that's down on the corner. Those have been mapped pretty carefully to retain them as much as possible. So those new districts are the kind of lighter purple and the lighter blue. So a lighter, lower scale, mixed use, and then a lighter residential office. So in addition to those districts, we have defined new industrial districts because your industrial regulations also do not match what you have on the ground. In fact, many of them are impossible to recreate. And so we've redone the industrial districts, but for the riverfront, we've defined a new riverfront overlay. And so I'll talk about that last. but that's for anything that might happen along the riverfront and kind of preserving the views and the access to the river. And then finally, what we've done is we have mapped all of the civic and institutional buildings and actually given them their own zoning districts so that those can maintain that kind of special place within your community, the churches and your post office and your libraries and the borough hall and so on. This is, it's a dashed outline on top of the industrial use that's currently allowed. And the idea behind this is that there would be, if a section were to develop, that there would be a sort of a master plan developed for it before it would get implemented. And the master plan would show the connectivity of all streets and parks and green space along the riverfront that might occur on the site. So it's to get, instead of just one part being developed without really thinking about how that part would work with the rest of it, the idea is to kind of think it through and design it out to the best of your ability at that time. It does have street sections and types of open space defined within it. This is just one example of what could be defined for it, but there's an infinite number of possibilities. So the way that the regulations are written, it's a series of block and street types and open space types, and then you use the districts that we have in the rest of the city plus one that it would allow for riverfront residential to lay them out and get a mix of districts on the riverfront site. Does that make sense?
So you haven't pre-done it. You've left it open so it could be done, I won't say on the fly, but as per a developer.
Right. Think of it as kind of a kit of parts. So the kit of parts would be the streets and the blocks and the open space types and the zoning districts that we've given you, and then they would sort of use those to define something that would work for the site. And then the last section is we do have some design regulations that deal with building materials and balconies and little design section like that, but those only apply to anything developed in the riverfront or anything developed in the downtown districts. So they only apply in those two locations, and they're pretty straightforward.
Because you're not applying to the neighborhood.
No, we're not. We're being much more sort of open in the neighborhood. So the building form regulations and the neighborhood regulations are very simple. So it's just the form of the building, where it's located on the site, a little bit about the front facade, having windows and doors, and then that's pretty much it in terms of regulations. Uses, obviously.
WTYM, Katanning Ford City, on the radio at AM 1380 and FM 103.7, and online at WTYMradio.com. Radio, computer, or smartphone. Stay connected to radio for your neighborhood.